Each subject. All right. Our next speaker. Oh, look at you. You get a chance to talk now. You've been doing everything else all day since you came. All right, Rachel. And next month you won't be here. I don't know. We need 3 people to take what you're doing. I don't know how we're going to do it. You can't come here and set up and then go and do it.
No, can't.
Darn it, anyway. All right, you're doing speech number 2 from the Speaking to Inform Advanced Manual, Resources for Informing. And you have 15 minutes. Timers, please. Your evaluator is past District Governor Pamela Winter, Distinguished Toastmaster, and your title is Amateur Radio. Get involved. Let's all welcome Rachel Weiss. And we'll talk about your other job at the end of the meeting.
All right.
Good.
Thank you, Fran. Our Toastmaster and producer, our Toastmasters in the audience, and you, our home audience. Amateur radio. It's anything but amateur. Why is it called amateur radio? Because we do a job that doesn't get paid for, just like amateur athletes. Many of you have a favorite football team, whether that be high school or college. They're called amateur athletes because they're not being paid. One of my favorite contacts, someone that I talked to on the radio, was Walter Cronkite. I would not call him an amateur. Amateur radio is something that started back in the 1900s. There's a lot of work that's been done. Amateur enthusiasts are that, experimenters, engineers, people that are trying different things and doing things in different ways. I started with amateur radio in 1968 when I saw a young man and his father putting a radio antenna on top of their garage. I watched them working and pulling this together. And after it was up, they did a little bit of a test, and then they invited me to come in. And they got me to speak on the radio. And I made my first long-distance contact and talked to someone in France. Now, you have to understand, I started learning French in the 1st grade. So this was exciting, to talk French to somebody that French is their first language. That led me to getting bit by the bug, the amateur radio bug. And I got every book that I could on electronics out of the library. That led to a career. I became an electrical engineer, specializing in electronics engineering and then computer engineering. I developed some things that were cutting edge, leading technology. Something like a ring laser gyroscope that was used to have antennas follow the satellites on a moving airplane, US-1, the airplane of our president. Amateur radio broke ground in a lot of different ways. We were the first internet, radio teletype. I had gone to Polytechnic University of New York, or Brooklyn Poly, and we talked to MIT and Caltech using the amateur radio through radio teletype. Amateur radio has done a lot of different things, and a lot of the technology that we have today is a benefit of amateur radio. Amateur radio is more than just talking to people overseas or somewhere else, but that's part of the fun of the hobby. And I have a couple of things that I want to share with you. Something called a QSL. That's a confirmation of communication between 2 parties. And first, I'm going to share a little bit about what was domestic. And my QSL card is in the center of the picture that's going to be put up on this display. And right above my card is a Mars card. That's military amateur radio. And then to the upper right corner is K2BAR. That's a club station. The lower left corner is an organization, a business, that has an amateur radio station in it, because many of their engineers are amateur radio operators. And then the one right below my card in the center, that was someone that I made contact with that was deaf. So even deaf people are involved in amateur radio. And if you look on the either side of the triangle, it's the signs for HI to say hi. Amateur radio can bring you in the world closer together. I've also spoken to DX stations. DX is long distance. And I picked out a couple of interesting DX cards for you as well. Azore Islands, Croatia. And what's on the card is based on who they are. They're going to display maybe kitty cats because they're really into their cats. And you can see that there's one card there in the center to the right. Or someone that's really involved in bicycling. So he put a picture of himself on the bicycle. Or maybe it's because they have their radio on a beautiful lake and they're getting out on the lake. Amateur radio is a way of expressing who we are and what we do. And part of what we do and who we are is the work that we do. When I got involved in amateur radio, I built my own equipment. On the table, I have an example of a Heath kit. The term kit meant that it was kit. We built it from parts, resistors and capacitors and something called vacuum tubes. Next to that radio is a modern radio, and you can see the difference in the size. The radios are the way that we are able to communicate or talk. So the green radio on your left is the Heath kit. That was 1970s. And then the radio on the right is my current radio, and you can see a big difference. Now the one on the left, that's only part of it. There's 3 other parts that goes along with that. There's a receiver, a transmitter, and a power supply. Can you imagine having all that equipment? It would have taken more than the DS, more than this table to fit it all. And now, the little radio that was to the right of that, I can put that in the car. So I have a mobile radio that's in the car. I have another similar size radio that's in my shack, which is the room dedicated to amateur radio in my house. It's connected to the internet through my laptop. The laptop's able to control the radio, so that's called something like software-defined radio. We have a lot of different things that are going on. Amateur radio is also giving back to the community. One of the things that we did last week was a radio fox hunt. That's where we're taking little radios and looking for somebody. Why? Well, if you see I have a bracelet on my wrist, someone that has ADHD or Alzheimer's, they could wander off and then get lost. And through radio fox hunting, we'd be able to find them and bring them back to safety, make sure that they get the medications they need, make sure that they're not out in the inclement weather. Radios have come a long way. Used to be the Hammarlund radio would cost a month's salary to buy. Today, radios can be expensive also. The radio that I showed you before was about $600. This was my handy talkie, my portable radio in 1973. That's the current portable radio. This one also costs about $500, but it doesn't take $500 to get into the hobby. We can take a radio like this that costs $40, almost does exactly the same thing as this radio, but this means that someone that's of a youth, like I was when I was in elementary school or junior high school, can get into the hobby. It's not out of their pocket range. And speaking of pockets, technology is such that I even have this radio, which does the same thing as those 3, but does fit in my pocket. I can take amateur radio anywhere with me. Amateur radio gives back to the community. We're involved not only with radio finding, but also with something that's coming tomorrow, the New York City Marathon. Over 800 amateur radio operators will be around the course to make sure not only are the runners safe, but the spectators are safe. That if there's any issue on the course, it's being addressed and taken care of. I'll be one of the net control operators for the marathon on Sunday, November 2nd. They're going to be using these type of radios when they're out along the course, or maybe a mobile radio that's in their car. Amateur radio helps. We were down in the Dominican Republic when they had the earthquake and the tornadoes, the hurricanes. We were with Katrina, and even here on Staten Island with Hurricane Sandy. We were there to help evacuate those that were trapped because of flood tidal waters or because of downed trees. We're involved in the community, whether that be for a fireworks display and helping crowd control, or whether that be just working with the Boy Scouts or the Cub Scouts or the Girl Scouts and letting them know what amateur radio is about. I have the privilege of having the highest rank in amateur radio, an amateur extra class license. Along with that comes responsibility of being a mentor. In ham radio speak, that's being an Elmer. I teach classes, technician class, general class, advanced classes, amateur extra classes, and help people get their license, understand what electronics is about, understand what radio is about, and help them get involved with the community, get involved with other organizations. The Amateur Radio Relay League, the ARRL, celebrated their 100th anniversary this year. The club that I'm a president of, the Bergen Amateur Radio Association, has celebrated 51 years. So a lot of different clubs and a lot of different people are involved. You can get on the website and get more information. There's a calendar to find out if there's a class in your area if you're interested in getting a license. Or just come out. We'd be happy to show you what it's all about, to get you on the air, to get you involved in what's happening with amateur radio. Amateur radio is digital, PSK, RTTY. It is audio. It is visual, slow scan TV, fast scan TV, high definition TV. We did it all. We got involved. Many of my good friends have worked or are working for CBS or NBC or ABC. They have radio clubs also, just as Walter Cronkite. One of the things that brought me the best pleasure was working with one of the regional high schools and getting involved with one of the students there who was a junior in high school and getting a connection with the International Space Station. We got all the schools involved. We got someone representing each class to pose a question to the astronaut and for them to get the response, to see their faces, and not just their faces, but the faces of their parents that were in the audience was phenomenal. How can we help you? How can we get you involved? Is it for CART or CERT, that's a Community Emergency Response, a Community Animal Response Team? Is it for Office of Emergency Management to deal with storms? With the National Weather Service, maybe you're interested in weather? Whatever you're interested in, there's something with amateur radio. We have a YL, that's a young ladies' net on Monday nights. Only ladies are allowed to be on the radio. And we share recipes, and we share how to get stains out of a garment, or how to program our radios. It's whatever it is that you want. There's something there for you. I know this is a lot of information. I know that you probably have a lot of questions. Again, ARRL, ARRL.org, or the Bergen Amateur Radio Association, www.bara.org. That's where I'm the president. We'd be happy to help you. So I'm not just a Toastmaster. I'm not just part of the crew here, but I am also involved in helping you, our studio audience, helping our community be safe and have fun.
Thank you very, very much. I don't know if I told you this, but we had a member of our North Shore Toastmasters Club during the 90s, and she was a ham operator. And when I started this club, No Limits, in 1998, she came to my house because it was started for people with disabilities.
Yes.
And I had the first meeting, and it was Terry Russo, who people on Staten Island know, and her 4 sons. All four had Down syndrome. They were all adopted, and 3 of them were of the right age. So I invited Carol to come, Carol Perry, to tell them about ham radio operating. And she did, and she was talking about, she was a teacher or something over at one of the high schools over on the other side of the island. And she was telling her class about the ham radio, and she was showing them how it operates and everything. All of a sudden, there was an interruption to her call, and it was one of the astronauts from Cape Kennedy. And he said, I was listening to you, and I just wanted to say hello and pop in. They got to be friendly, and he invited her to 3 space shots. She went all the way down to Florida for the space shots, and it was very exciting to hear her talk about that.
And amateur radio is somewhere where you can make a friend.
And never see them again.
You may never see them, or as when I went to Europe, they invite me in, and then I operate from their radio.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
So it can be fun.
Saves
can be exciting.
Saves on the telephone bill, right?
Oh, it's free. It just costs you the time to learn to pass the exam. The technician class is 35 questions out of a 500 question pool. And
Sounds like table topics, doesn't it?
And when I got my license in 1968, I had to know Morse code. That's no longer a requirement. So you don't have to learn a foreign language to get an amateur radio license.
Okay, I think you've given people a lot to think about. I can just hear my son. Oh, that's something we haven't tried yet. Okay. Thank you very much, Rachel. It's
You're welcome.
very, very exciting hearing that. All right, off.